This PowerPoint will be airspace and the type of airspace that you'll encounter, and type of airspace you need to look as your pre-flight planning on your Charlotte sectional. References will be Chapter 4D out of your JEP. You'll have some information on Part 61, Part 91, which is out of the FARs, and your Airman's Information Manual. The contents of this PowerPoint will include general information on the airspace, different types of airspace, including Class A, Class B, C, D, E, and G. Notice there's no F. We'll also look at airport advisory areas. We'll look at restricted areas, prohibited areas, warning areas, alert areas, MOAs or military operations areas, controlled firing areas, the definition of each and the characteristics. We'll look at dimensions. We'll look at VFR weather requirements for each type of airspace. We'll look at equipment requirements. Different airspace requires different equipment. And we'll look at some restrictions as it pertains to the airspace. Mainly there's two types of airspace or categories of airspace: that which is regulated, restricted, and prohibited, or that is not regulated, warning areas and MOAs. Within these categories there are four different types: controlled airspace, A, B, C, D, and E; uncontrolled airspace, which is Class G; special use airspace, which is warning, restricted, and prohibited areas; and others, like airport advisory areas. Again, Class A airspace is a controlled airspace, and it begins at 18,000 feet MSL, which is also called flight level 180. It extends up to and includes flight level 600 or 60,000 feet, excluding airspace less than 1,500 feet AGL in Alaska. And then it extends out to 12 nautical miles from the coast when you get over the oceans, Pacific or Atlantic. VFR is not applicable because in order to enter Class A airspace, you have to be on an IFR flight plan. You have to have Mode C and two-way radio, which now, as of January, you need to have ADSB, and you can't operate their VFR or VFR on top. You have to have an ATC clearance to enter Class A airspace. Obviously, you're on a IFR flight plan. Again, here it is, your Class A airspace. From 18,000 feet or flight level 180 up to flight level 600. Most aircraft actually operate from about 18,000 up to about 30,000. So that's where you're going to see a lot of general aviation. And of course, the airliners will operate from about 30,000 up to about 35 to 40,000. Class B airspace, think B as busy. Okay, extends from the surface or higher to specific altitudes, which is individually tailored for every operating area or busy airport. But generally, it terminates at 10,000 feet MSL. It resembles an upside-down wedding cake, whereas the altitudes will change as you get closer to an airfield that is surrounded by the Class B airspace. VFR weathermins are 3 statute miles. Now notice it's statute miles for visibility, and you have to stay clear of clouds. You have to have Mode C again, or ADSB now, inside and within 30 nautical miles of Class B airspace, and you have to have two-way radio. You also have to have clearance to enter. There's a 250 knots limit below 10,000 feet, and 200 knots in the airspace underlying the Class B if you fly underneath the Class B airspace, or in VFR corridors within that airspace. And again, you have to have ATC clearance to enter that Class B airspace. There's your Class A airspace right here. Now your Class B airspace, you'll notice it looks like an upside down cake. So from about 10,000 feet down to a specific altitude here, out to that 30 miles, you'll have that will be your Class A airspace, or Class B airspace, excuse me, and you can fly underneath of that. As you get in closer to the airport, then that Class B airspace will be from that 10,000 all the way down to a lower altitude, okay? So you can see as you go in closer, and each Class B airspace has its own basically boundaries. And as you're getting closer to that airport, it gets lower and lower and lower. So you could actually fly outside this Class B airspace, like flying down here. This is what they were talking about, 200 knot limit underneath the Class B airspace. Class C airspace is your next busiest airports. Charlotte, by the way, is Class B airspace, and Raleigh is Class C. Dimensions are individually tailored to that airspace and usually consists of a 5 nautical mile radius from the airport and from the surface up to 4,000 feet above the airport. And it's about 10 nautical miles radius shelf from 1,200 up to 4,000 above the airport, and 20 nautical miles outer area extending from the lower radar limits to the ceiling of the approach controls airspace. So here's what they're talking about. From about the surface, if you will, up to about 1,200 AGL, you go out to about 5 nautical miles. So you could fly, if you were 8 or 9 nautical miles below that 1,200 feet, you can fly underneath the Class C airspace. And again, when you get out up to 1,200 feet, out to 10 nautical miles, between 12 and 4,000 feet. So the Class C airspace basically looks like what I call a mushroom. Okay, Class B is an upside down cake, and the Class C looks like a mushroom. Class C, again, your weatherman's inside of Class C is, again, 3 statute miles, and your cloud clearance is 500 feet below. You have to stay 1,000 feet above and 2,000 feet horizontally from any clouds. If you're a VFR, you cannot go in the clouds. You got to have Mode C transponder and now ADS-B and a 2-way radio. Your airspeed limit, again, is 250 knots below 2,000 feet and 200 knots within 4 nautical miles of your primary airport below 2,500 feet AGL. And you do have to have ATC clearance, so you got to be talking to air traffic control to enter that Class C airspace. VFR arrival communications, you've got to have 2-way contact, and the controller has to repeat your call signs so that you know that you're approved to enter that Class C airspace. Satellite operations, if you've got other airports working within the Class C airspace, departing an uncontrolled satellite airport that underlies Class C airspace, when you approach that Class C airspace after takeoff from that uncontrolled airfield, for example, in Raleigh, North Raleigh exec is in the Class C airspace. Down in Charlotte, you've got Charlotte exec, which you take off uncontrolled and then enter their Class B airspace if you climb out. So you need to be talking to ATC as soon as possible after takeoff. Secondary airports where Class C overlies other Class D airspace, portions of the overlapping Class C may be procedurally excluded when the secondary control tower is open. In other words, if you are working in a Class D airspace, which is in a airport traffic area, then you talk to that tower as opposed to the ATC, because they'll be talking to each other. Okay, again, there's your Class A airspace above 18,000. There's your Class B airspace, your upside down cake, 10 nautical miles, 5 nautical miles, and then your Class C airspace, which looks like a mushroom. Class D airspace is basically, you figure it's a cylinder, goes from surface up to 2,500 feet, AGL. Now notice that's AGL, that's above the ground, but it's depicted on the charts in MSL. It's basically a special airspace that is protected and for instrument approaches, even if the airport is uncontrolled. And a lot of times you'll also have a Class D would be tower controlled. Again, VFR weather, 3 statute miles and basic cloud clearance, 500 feet below, 1,000 above, and 2,000 horizontal. And you have to have at least a 1,000-foot ceiling to operate within the Class D airspace. You got to be talking to the tower. Okay, that's your blue airfields on your sectional charts. Special V needed if conditions are below 1,000 feet or less than 3 miles. So you have to actually ask for special VFR procedures. To obtain that special VFR clearance from ATC, and at least have to have a private pilot certificate. So if you're a student pilot, you cannot fly Special V. There you go. There's your Class D airspace. Looks like a cylinder, and that's usually about 5 miles from a active airport, and that's a blue airport with a tower control. Okay, Class E begins at 14,500, excluding below 1,500 feet AGL. That means if you've got like 13,000 foot mountains, extends up to, but not including 18,000 MSL. That's where you're getting into your Class A airspace. You may also begin at the surface at 700 AGL, 1,200 AGL, or other altitudes as desired. You have to have VFR weather again, same as Class C and D, except above 10,000 feet, your visibility has to be 5 statute miles. That's like if you're in the mountains. 1,000 feet above, 1,000 feet below, and 1 statute mile horizontal distance for your cloud clearance. No equipment required because you're VFR. Again, if you're below 10,000 feet, you have to be below 250 knots. That's standard. Okay, there you go. There's your Class A, B, C, D, Class E airspace right here. Okay, your Class G is uncontrolled airspace from the surface to the base to the overlying controlled airspace, either 7, 12, or 14,500. Again, your VFR weathers per Part 91. Below 1,200 feet, you just need to stay clear of clouds. Above 1,200 feet and below 10,000, 1 statute mile, and at night 3 statute miles for your visibility. And then you have to stay 500 below, 1,000 above, and 2,000 horizontal. Above 1,200 feet and above 10,000 MSL day or night, the visibility requirements goes up to 5, and then 1,000 below and 1,000 above, 1 statute mile horizontal, and your VFR, so no special equipment is required. Although you probably want to have a transponder and be squawking 1,200. Okay, any overlapping airspace applies to the same airspace, and the operating rules associated with more restrictive airspace applies. So Class A is more restrictive than B, C, D, or E, so it will take precedence. Class B is more restrictive than C, D, E, or G, so it, in fact, will take precedence. Class C, more restrictive than these, and it would take precedence. Class D would take precedence if you're in a tower, talking to a tower. And Class C is more restrictive than your uncontrolled airspace, Class G. Okay. Now your special areas. I'm going to pick this up with the next video. I'm going to stop here for now, and then record this on YouTube, and then we will pick this PowerPoint up with prohibited areas and other types of special use airspace.